This video is a quick illustration of how to set up your ski bindings correctly in terms of forward and aft position, release settings, and forward pressure settings. First choice you have to make is where the center of your boot will be. The center of your ski may be marked like this. This forward position is good for riders who like to go backwards and forwards, riding switch, or doing tricks in the park. So center mount. Rear mount would be if you prefer to ski on powder or soft surfaces where you want your tips to be lighter. Anywhere in between, personal preference. I have chosen to align the center of my boot with this little mark here, somewhat to the rear of the center mount point. I happen to use a Tyrolia power rail system, but the principles apply to just any kind of binding. Of course, having a rail where you can adjust your bindings position anywhere is very helpful, because then you can move the boot center according to your preferences during the day as you switch from riding park to riding powder to anything in between on the slopes. Now you need to find the length of the sole of your boot, which is in millimeters, and this one in particular is 317 millimeters. So assuming you've aligned your center mark where you want it, then it's easy on the system. Just find a 317 millimeter range, which would be right here, between 350 and 322 in this case, or thereabouts. Do the same thing in the rear, right here, and you're ready to mount. Now I'm gonna make an intentional error and be one notch away from where I want to be, okay? So I have an extra space here. You will see that the ski boot will mount just fine. You may not notice any issues at first, and in fact your ski boot center, you can feel the notch here aligns perfectly where I want it to be, because my front is aligned correctly. But if you look in the rear, where the indicators for the forward pressure are, you can see that I'm outside of the correct range. I'm outside of the markings here, barely ahead of the first of the 5 notches. This means my rearward binding, or basically the distance between the 2 bindings, is too big. This means my DIN adjustments right here will not necessarily work correctly. So what I need to do is set the distance between the front and the rear binding correctly to match the sole length of my boot. So here, move it to the correct position, snap it in place, put it back in, and now we have perfect forward pressure smack in the middle of the range. So focus, there you go. You can see we're between the 5 marks, somewhat halfway in the range, which is perfect. Now if the edge of the binding here goes way beyond this point, which is possible if you have a larger than necessary boot and a smaller than necessary distance between the bindings, then you have too much forward pressure. Your release will be affected and your safety as well. Only after you have adjusted your forward pressure and mounting position would you want to adjust your DIN settings. Calculate them according to your preferences and adjust as needed. This is for my daughter, lightweight person, so beginner skiing according to her height and weight and skiing preferences. The DIN setting is about 3.5, which is what I have here. Similarly in the rear, it's hard to see, but there it is at the beginning of the DIN range.